Welcome back to the French Rugby Podcast with me, Tim Groves, ex-Scotland international and adopted Frenchman Johnny Beattie, and former Ireland hooker, ex-Grenoble coach, friend of the show, Bernard Jackman is joining us to analyse the hell out of the most anticipated clash in this year's Six Nations, Ireland-France this weekend. We will, of course, come on to France's narrow win over Italy very shortly, but I can't really ask you how you are, Johnny, without mentioning the Calcutta Cup. You're obviously at Twickenham at the weekend, so guessing you're pretty well?
Very hungover still. It's Monday. Very proud, delighted for Scotland. And just a changing of the times, mate. Like, I played loads against England. I think the best I managed was I drew one. I won fuck all games against England. So the fact that these boys now have gone 3 back-to-back for the first time since the 1970s, it's incredible. So I couldn't be happier for the boys and for Gregor. I watched the game with Toby Flood, Andy Good, Dylan Armitage, the people that have never lost to Scotland. So a massive shift in the perspective, I think. I think people didn't really respect the fact that they won there during COVID. But the fact that they did it again in front of 82,000 pairs of red chinos and gilets and Guinness, it was epic. And it was really weird, mate. It was quite quiet in the stadium. There's been a lot on social media about it as well, but Twickenham is very corporate. It's a very quiet stadium, so incredible for the players. And we saw the average beer consumption at Twickenham is 8 pints per head at Twickenham on game day. So it's basically just a massive piss up. But the one team that brought the rugby was Scotland, and they did enough to get through. Massive result, an amazing day, a great weekend for Scottish sports fans, and I absolutely loved it. It was great fun.
You described Murrayfield as the library in the autumn, I think. What does that make Twickenham?
So, mate, it's weird because I'm used to Bayonne or you're at Toulon or wherever it is, and it's mayhem, right? It's carnage. French rugby fans are a different breed. And that, because I've been here for 10 years, that's what you get used to. It's festive. Whereas British rugby, generally, when you get back, is quiet. Murrayfield, the library, that's more when Edinburgh play. When Scotland play, there's a bit more to get behind them, you know? But
you're wriggling out of it now.
No, I'm scrumming. The difference between Murrayfield and Twickenham was marked. I mean, Twickenham was dead. And I was sat next to Toby Flood watching the start of the game, and I was like, mate, is it always like this? And he's like, yep. This is what it's like. You just get used to it. You just get used to playing with the quiet and trying to excite them and trying to get them up. But that's it. When they didn't manage to get that big break and a big gap, there was space and effort, and Scottish fans got behind their team, and Scotland came back into the game, and it was awesome. Great weekend of rugby, an amazing few games that we got to see, and delighted for the Scottish boys. It was very cool.
And speaking of atmospheres, it's often not brilliant at the Stadio Olimpico because it's often half full. Italy are often getting pumped. Not so at the weekend. It was bouncing at times, wasn't it?
It was, but that's because Italy came out and played. You know, it's been poor for them in the past because it's been one-way traffic and their team's been losing. But now you've got a team that can play. That makes a difference. You've got French support that travelled as well that was up. But the fact that the game was a real story and it was a real back and forth and there was loads to cheer about, the quality of play from both sides, although some of it was fractious and France made a lot of errors, there was lots to shout about, lots of ball in hand, lots of line breaks, lots of tackle breaks. And it was exciting. And the atmosphere was absolutely rocking. It was class.
And we gave him the big build-up last week. Ange Capuozzo did not disappoint.
Not bad, is he? Look, his try was excellent to beat Greg. Bless him. The one guy you don't want to get caught in a one-on-one. Greg, who actually bust his backside to get out. But Ange Capuozzo, like the agility of the boy to beat Greg, incredible. But then also I think we saw a little bit of his rounded game. He was great as a second receiver. He was popping up in midfield. He's clearly got a vision of play as well as decision-making on the ball. Was great through multi-phase, which adds a new dimension to Italian phase play attack. And he just, I don't know, he gets you out of your seat or is an injection of pace whenever he touches the ball. There's always a risk an offload's going to go. He just gives Italy that X factor that maybe they haven't had. And he gives everyone in the stadium a lift when he touches the ball. So he was class. He was great to watch.
And they clearly know that as well. It was clear that they were trying to get his hands on the ball as much as possible, which he would do.
Of course, it's like a young Stuart Hogg, right? So if you know somebody can unlock defenses, can cause utter carnage and chaos, create some situations that are going to end up in favourable play, you get the ball in his hands. And that was it. It was a nice mix. So he had a nice spread of taking the ball to the line in multi-phase and actually, you know, almost like league style, like dropping a shoulder, short balls when it meant to be going out the back, dropping somebody straight through a line just by reading the defensive line. His kick game was safe. He was decent in the air. The one thing you worry about is because he's so slight that he's going to get broken, but he seems to wriggle out of things or find a way with some explosive power to get an arm free or offload. So no, clearly as well from backfield, they try and give it to him and they allow him to sort of pry into the defensive line when he's running back. So like really interesting to see how he's going to evolve. Still a little bit of an unknown for some defenses, but clearly now defense coaches are going to say, look, when this guy gets the ball in backfield, wise up, because again, at the weekend, he was looking at chip kicks, he was looking to step, he was crossing the field, lots of different parts to his play, but really encouraging. We've got another star, hopefully, emerging and shining bright for Italy.
And it wasn't just him, huge performances elsewhere for Italy, the likes of Fischetti, Negri had big games.
Yeah.
But from a French perspective, Shaun Edwards afterwards was very unhappy with some of the refereeing interpretations. I don't know whether that was the actual decisions or whether it was just the fact that his team had conceded 18 penalties and that's unheard of. That was actually the most penalties France have conceded in the Six Nations since 2003. So crazy.
How many was
stats.
it? How many was it total?
18.
So like I saw part of their prep and I spoke to some of the players in camp on the Thursday before, and they just come out of a meeting where they'd been told that in 2021 and in 2022, their worst discipline performance was against Italy, where they conceded 15 in each game. So they were told.
Yeah.
They were told. I'm not sure if it's a Latin thing or the fact they're coming up against Italians and things get a bit loose, but
that game in 2003 as well, where there was 20 or something, that was Italy as well. So maybe it is a thing.
But they were told about it. They were warned. So even with the learnings, the players still got it wrong, which I find really bizarre. And even like Sekou Makulu after the game said that the messages when they were coming onto the field was hands out of the ruck. Don't stick your noses in anything. He then goes on to win the final turnover that wins the game by sticking his hands in a ruck because he was 100% sure. But I don't know. It was a real mix of the self-inflicted shooting themselves in the foot and giving Italy a leg up, giving them 40 meters at each time to gain on the gain line and go forward. And Italian pressure. Italy played well. They really did pressurize France. Olivon came up with 4 pens and a yellow card in the end, and it's not good enough. Like, you just know, professional level, you have to aim for less than 10 every single game, or else you get punished. And Italy very nearly punished them. France, like, they come away bizarrely disappointed with the performance. They come away with a bonus point win, so they march on, but they're going to have to be so much better this week if they're going to cause Ireland any trouble.
And what you mentioned there about the breakdown and the messages coming on and them not feeling like they could compete will have had a massive knock-on effect on this. But Italy, as a result, had very quick ball. I think it was 68% of their rucks were under 3 seconds. Normally, France are very good at slowing teams down. And obviously Ireland love quick ball. So that is clearly an area where Shaun Edwards will be working all week on that, won't he?
Yeah, but then I really enjoy, and this is Kieran Crowley. Look, they've beaten Australia in the autumn. They're evolving themselves. They're a good team, but I like the way strategically how they attacked. So like when you come up against France, big blitz defense, big strong men around like the 9-10 channel. So they come up, they hit hard, and they just steered away from it. They sort of ticed them in, nice little pod off 9 out the back, and they attacked outside in the 10 channel, which meant you take away the middle of the field, which means it's way harder to blitz. So if you split a defensive line, once you've got one quick ball and you've got them on the back foot, it becomes quicker and quicker. So I really enjoyed, perversely should be following the French side, but I enjoyed the tactical blend of how they tried to take away the middle of the field from France and how that gave them that quick ruck speed. The stat you mentioned is ridiculous, and France generally are very, very good at competing for ball, but there weren't the dominant collisions because they weren't in the 9 channel. There weren't the backward hits. There wasn't the ability for the boys to get their hands in and compete as normally there is. So like Ireland will have looked at that as well. How and where did Italy attack and why, and how do you try and fix a French defense? But that's the continued evolution for all these different sides, is how do you continue to get better? And like the amazing thing from the weekend again was that each and every single one of the games could really have gone either way, apart from Wales, who started very poorly. But the quality of the product on show, the Grand Slam champions going away to Italy, you couldn't have written that type of game. But Italy were absolutely excellent, and I really enjoyed it. So yes, Shaun will be disappointed, but that's coaching. Like, you prepare, the first game is always very hard, and they'll have to be better this weekend.
There may be a couple of contenders from that game and a whole round of action from the top 14 as well, which we might touch on a bit later on. So let's find out what your meter moment of the week is, Johnny.
Can I be biased?
Oh, God.
Come on, there has to be one.
Are you allowed to do this?
Am I not allowed to do this?
Yeah, you can do it. Go on, then.
I think I can, mate. Duhan, the Duhan, super dewy, and I love the
defense,
manner
wasn't
of
it?
It was shocking, mate. We can all talk about the England game, but I couldn't believe how bad some bits of their game were. I'm not sure if you saw Steve Borthwick this morning as well, coming out and say, you've no idea how bad the side is I inherited. That their scrum quality wasn't even the top 10 for a tier 1 nation. The ruck speed is the slowest of the tier 1 nations. But some of the fundamentals of their game were absolutely shambolic, and Scotland capitalised, which leads on to how they capitalised in the meter moment of the week. But probably already the try of the tournament, I don't think we're going to see better. An appalling kick chase, but step forward the Duhan. The world's best assist by Kyle Steyn, a 10-metre pass in the middle of the field, which seems to open everything up, the parting of the Red Sea. And Duhan van der Merwe, absolutely incredible. Like, for Scots in the stadium and watching at home on TV, I'm not sure we'll see another try like that in our lifetimes. Beating 5 Englishmen, breaking tackles, running 55 metres straight down their throats, papping Dombrand off like a small schoolgirl at the end. Absolute bliss for Scottish rugby fans in the meter moment of the weekend. It was phenomenal. To see it there in person was even better. Nothing to do with French rugby. It's an absolute cop-out and a cheat, but the best try from the weekend. It was phenomenal.
We'll allow it.
Just once.
That was Johnny's meter moment of the week. And Meter is the world's #1 wireless meat thermometer, recently making over 20 million cooks better with their game-changing app and completely wireless Bluetooth meat probe. You can use it on a barbecue, in the oven, or in a pan, and you can get your hands on one at meter.com. Plus, you can now get 10% off any full price item. All you have to do is enter the code FrenchPod10 at checkout. That's FrenchPod10, and you'll get 10% off any full price item at meter.com. Let's get our guest on now then and focus fully on the biggest clash in this year's Six Nations as the top 2 teams in the world go head to head in Dublin this weekend. We can have a chat with former Ireland hooker, ex-Grenoble coach and friend of the show, Bernard Jackman. How you doing?
Yeah, great. Thanks, guys. Looking forward to this weekend and looking forward to this chat.
Not too much doubt who had the more impressive performance at the weekend, Ireland or France in round 1. So is confidence high in Ireland, or are you slightly nervous?
Oh, no, look, we're nervous. I think there's huge respect for France. And I think there's a lot of people in Ireland who feel maybe they should be #1 in the world, you know, in terms of what they've done over the last year. They have the Grand Slam. What are they, 15 games in a row unbeaten. But look, we're in a decent place as well. And obviously last year we lost away in Paris without Johnny Sexton, and probably with an Irish team who weren't as comfortable in terms of the style of play that Andy Farrell and Mike Catt and Simon Easterby and Paul O'Connell are trying to impose. So we looked like we've moved on a little bit. Obviously New Zealand was a big thing for us to win our first test series down there. And we backed it up in November. Not probably as convincingly, but we beat Australia and South Africa in tight games, which I think that's what France have been doing. France have been very good at finding a way to win, and I'd like to think we're getting there. But this is a huge test, and the worst scenario for us was France playing as badly as they did and still get the 5 points and have Shaun Edwards on them all week about discipline and you know, and obviously if they're better in those areas, then they're significantly more dangerous. So it's going to be fascinating.
Do you think it was just rust for France at the weekend, or did Italy cause them problems that Ireland will obviously have picked up on?
I think they did, to be honest. I think Italy were good. The back row was excellent. They found space. They found space in the back line. And Italy, look, I'm glad to see Italy get better. I was probably one of those people saying 2 years ago, if they didn't start to show improvement, maybe they should have to have a playoff to guarantee their position. But obviously beating Wales away, beating Australia, in the November, the way they played yesterday, they're going to add value to this competition. And the under-20s were very unlucky to lose to France as well. So that's really positive, I think. And I respect Italy, but I also think France traditionally have struggled at times with Italy, particularly away from home. and it was a game that France didn't really have. All they could do is basically get a win without, the manner of it, the challenges that lay ahead was always going to be a little bigger for them. So I think I understand why France weren't as probably fluid as they would have liked, but I do expect a big improvement this weekend.
And in terms of how Italy did apply pressure, what do you think Andy Farrell will have seen, liked, and he'll decide, right, we can roll that out too? I know they've got their own way of playing, but there'll be certain elements he'll been really pleased with and saw some weaknesses that France displayed.
Yeah, they did. I thought defense. Well, like obviously, look, they had a lot of possession because of the amount of penalties they won. But I thought they won penalties at the breakdown. Shaun Edwards feels, maybe some of them were a bit harsh, whatever. But I thought because they were asking questions of France, their ball movement was good. Their carry clean was very accurate. They were very direct when they needed to be, very physical and lay down a marker. And France seemed to get a little bit caught up and tetchy by not having the type of possession or making the dominant tackles that they normally do. Ireland, at first, let's be honest, Kieran Crowley is a coach who likes to play. He had Benetton Treviso playing a very attractive brand of rugby, which got him very close to a playoffs in the old URC. He's got some exciting backs, and I think with Dante out, I thought a lot of pressure on Gail Fiku, and I thought they asked questions of him, and either side of him mainly, he's going to make his tackles, but I think that Italy exposed potential opportunities in that French backline defensively, and also Ireland don't play a massively dissimilar way to the way Italy want to play. Ireland are probably a little bit more consistent, probably a bit more miserly in terms of looking after the ball, but they are a team who play high tempo. And if you look at that game against, Wales, okay, it was our forwards who scored the first two tries, but in general, it came off, playing high tempo around the halfway line, having good smarts around whether to run or kick or kick on the edge. That gave us the field position, and then off line out strikes, we're pretty good at getting over the gain line. And then once you get over the gain line in that first phase, Ireland are good at staying on top of you. So it's the challenge for Ireland is, and this is, this, Johnny, is that Ireland, there still is a doubt, and Tim, there's a doubt about Ireland against big, powerful teams. Now, South Africa was big because obviously that they're the marker that you look for. But France, for me, France and South Africa are similar in terms of the size of forwards or even backs that they can pick. And obviously, this is Antonio, this is Marchand, this is Bai, this is Paul Willemse, or Taufania to come off the bench. To come off the bench. We don't get that regularly in this competition. We don't get that in the URC. A little bit more now. The South Africans have come in, so there's a fear in all Irish rugby pundits' minds around power can put a stop to us. So, and that's something that France have in spades.
Given the context of Gatland coming back, a new Wales but an old Wales, were you surprised by how quickly Ireland got into their stride and dominated that game at the weekend?
Yeah, it was so impressive, to be honest, because they went straight from Portugal on training camp. Ty Furlong was pulled out, and he's obviously a key player for us. Then people say, Ty Furlong, Johnny Sexton are key to Ireland. Absolutely, they are. But I think Gibson Park has become a player that you can put in the same bracket because of this high tempo and ball movement. And him to pull out the morning of the match could have been a disruption that made us maybe slow to start. But to be fair to Conor Murray, he was excellent. He's been dropped by Munster, but yet he was able to step up to play at international level and get back to the type of form that he became probably one of the top 2 or 3 scrum halves in the world in. And it was really impressive. We didn't make a mistake really for about 30 minutes. And obviously the James Lowe try was an intercept, but a good defensive read. And then we had a little blip in the third quarter, but then we finished strong. And from an Irish point of view, I think it was massive that Ross Byrne was on the field for that last 15 minutes when we had to go chase a bonus point, and he had a big impact in that because we have become very reliant on Sexton. Farrell has now made a choice that he's going away from Joey Carberry for this Six Nations anyway, who has been the backup. Ross Byrne is the backup in Leinster. He's probably the most like replacement for Johnny Sexton in terms of, you know, being able to boss the forwards, being a good game manager, having a decent passing game and a very good kicking game. And that's really important for us because we have become incredibly reliant on Sexton. So look at, and also I think mentality wise, if Wales got a good start there, that game could have been, you know, very different. And Ireland knew that, and they went out and just starved Wales of possession. Their discipline was very good. Their ball retention was very good. They scored every time they got into the Welsh 22, and they had the game taken away after 30 minutes. And that's very mature from us, and probably something that maybe we haven't been good in the past. And also, look, I'll tell you the truth. I mean, you know, we went into the 2023 as number one in the world theoretically. It's the World Cup year, and in the past we've been very poor in World Cup years from the start of the Six Nations, and it's burst the bubble. So that bubble can still get burst, but at least we're going into round two with it still full of air.
You mentioned the absence of Furlong and Gibson Park. They're two massive players for Ireland to miss. They clearly didn't against Wales. Which one is more of a loss against France, do you think, given the size of the French pack, but also then the tempo that Ireland need to play at?
I think Murray can get us there. I think the big one is Furlong, to be honest, just because of this French scrum. And Finlay Bealham, and I don't want to be critical of him because I think he's probably one of the most improved players in Irish rugby, and he was excellent against Wales, and he's been excellent for Connacht. But this is a different test, and it's not just a tight head prop. But if they come under pressure, that creates cracks across the rest of the scrum. And when you go away from home in a Six Nations, if you can find an area of weakness that's as important as potential weakness around the scrum, and be able to go for that second shove to be able to disrupt, you know, their put-ins, that's the big one for us. So I think I was worried about Gibson Park missing, but I thought Murray showed what he can do. We've got a replacement for him called Craig Casey, who's a high tempo scrum half from Munster. So if Connor's not having a great day, we do have that option to replace Gibson Park with a like for like, if you get me, with Casey. But the question mark is a little bit around, not some Bealham. I think Bealham can hold it to a certain extent. It's his replacement, a guy called Tom O'Toole, who's a powerful prop around the field, but isn't first choice scrummager in Ulster. Dan McFarlane, the Ulster coach, would go for a guy called Marty Moore if there was a fear around the scrum. So that's something that I think, you know, would particularly Marchand. I think Sarah Boy is a phenomenal loose at it. Don't think he's scrummaging that well at the moment, and that's a bit of a relief. But you know, with the pressure on the right hand side of the scrum, and if they can get that going across, you know, with the weight of Willemse or Taufania, with Antonio, with the strength of Marchand, if they can get that going across onto the Irish right hand side of the scrum, which will be Bealham or O'Toole, then that could be dangerous for us. And also Wayne Barnes, I mean, he's not afraid to make a decision at scrum time and go with his good as well. So that would be the big concern for me this weekend.
So yeah, it could be pivotal. And again, it's daft. We're asking a front row forward if he thinks the scrum's going to be pivotal in this weekend's game. But you think that genuinely could potentially be the key for France unlocking a win, is that if they achieve some sort of dominance at scrum time, cheap penalties, we saw what it did France-Italy. The other way this weekend, free field position, and you get yourself a foothold in the game. You think that it could be that big and that important that weekend, the loss of Tadhg Furlong for Ireland?
Yeah, I do, Johnny. And look at it, I'm not. Ireland haven't got exposed that much in the scrum in recent years, so it's probably not in everyone's mind. But there has been days when we have, not when Furlong played or Mike Ross, but when we've had to go to, you know, the backup, or John Hayes, but when we've had to go to the backup, there has been days when that's cost us. And let's be honest, you know, Leinster and Ireland are pretty similar. You know, a lot of the same players. The Leinster scrum has come under pressure without Tadhg Furlong, and it's made games more competitive than they maybe needed to be away to the Ospreys. And I think it's very lucky for Ireland that Nicky Smith didn't play against Ireland because he's been scrummaging the house down, but also Leinster losing to La Rochelle, in the final last year, the semi-final the year before. There was key moments when La Rochelle were able to win scrum penalties. Leinster losing to Saracens in that quarter-final the year before. The year during COVID, the year actually Saracens were in the championship. Leinster got knocked out by Saracens, and it was built around 7 or 8 scrum penalties. So, it only happens every now and again where the scrum becomes the dominant talking point of the game afterwards. And I'm hoping it doesn't be, but for me, that's the big area of concern.
And let's say that parity is achieved and it doesn't come into the game. If you were Fabien Galtier, how would you play against Andy Farrell's side? What would you look to exploit, or what other areas of weakness do you think could be exposed this weekend?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I saw how France exposed that narrowness in Italian's defence with the kick pass. Obviously, targeting De Mortier. I don't see that being an area that Ireland generally have more width in our defence. The teams that tend to, when they see weaknesses in Ireland, it's power, right? So it's getting your big ball carriers playing off 9, or going to 10 and back inside to a strike runner, not letting Ireland get off the line, and dominating them physically. And I think with some of the ball carrying players that France have, they can do that. And also using Mofana as a battering ram, even though I do think they miss Dante. I think he's become a key player for them. But the coaches that tend to, when they look at Ireland and how they defend, they're either very direct, they don't really go to wit early, or they go to the air a lot, and that sounds, I think you don't kick to Hugo Keenan. He's proven himself time and time again, but I do think James Lowe and Matt Hansen can be got at in the air, and yourself, once you start to, if you win a knock on, if Mac Hansen and James Lowe knock it on from a box kick or from a contestable, then you have a scrum, and if that's dominant. But also, if you can get that type of possession back, where it goes back on your side, and Ireland are in transition defence, that's where I think Ireland would fear France because of the individuals. Penno, Intermac, Dupont, obviously. Off the bench, then obviously Guérac, Jalibert. Guérac, they're so good in that transition phase, and being able to exploit potential holes. I think phase defence, I think Ireland are pretty comfortable, and I think we'd get a lot of confidence from our defence against Wales, particularly our goal line D. But off counter attack, which obviously Scotland exploited against England, counter attack or transition turnover ball, I think that's something that Galtier would be looking to try and get. Use that as a big source of possession. And let's be honest, I mean, Vlach Killier, who's the kicking coach for France, I think he has a big influence. And everyone talks about the French flair and the brilliance of France. France are very methodical in terms of how they play, and they kick a lot and they kick well. So this isn't rip it up. This is actually just probably doing what they do well, against a team that's probably suited to.
Very pragmatic.
I remember Shaun Edwards, when he was speaking to France about the job. Obviously, he coached against France a lot, and he was like, "I'm not taking this job unless you get a kicking coach, because, and not just a guy to teach players how to kick. It's actually to can make sure that we have clear kicking strategies, because no matter how good my defense is, if you kick as badly as you've kicked historically, you're going to get ripped apart." And I think together, with obviously improved fitness, a better set piece, it's all kind of just aligned now, which I don't think it was in the past.
And you mentioned that Shaun was absolutely spitting feathers after the game, not happy about the concession of 18 penalties and the interpretation. Wayne Barnes this weekend, generally, he's probably a bit more relaxed around the breakdown. And in recent years, obviously, these two have been the top 2 teams in the Six Nations. The battle has always been for speed of ball. So who do you think that favours, and who's going to come out on top in that respect?
Yeah, I don't think either of them will have rapid, quick ball, to be honest. And I agree with you about Wayne Barnes. I think, he's not one of these referees who feels they need to please the assessor, and are going to implement the laws to the absolute letter. I think he has more of a, sorry, I'm not saying I'm not criticizing someone else, but he has a good feel for the game, and he tries to create a bit of flow and communicate to players, and players will work with him. Then they'll do their job. They'll slow the ball down, but they won't give away the penalty. Whereas at the weekend, they were getting pinged for trying to just do just a little bit too much or just do enough. So I don't think either team would have rapid ball, to be honest. I think when you have the physicality that France have, a switched on France, and it kind of happened in the first quarter against Wales, where Ireland first half Ireland were just getting over the gain line, getting their noses through contact. Wales couldn't make 2-man hits, and the ball was rapid, right? And then in the second half, Ireland weren't getting those noses through contact. They're getting 2-man hits in the tackle, and the ball was slower. And then the next phase was difficult. And then because I think Ireland probably got caught trying to overplay in that third quarter, and that's probably something that Johnny will reflect on, because we were chasing a bonus point, and we got ourselves in trouble. Whereas I think, and this doesn't sound great, because I think this game might be real cagey and really tactical, and we won't see Ireland, throwing the ball around, and we won't see France either. But yet there could be one moment of magic or two moments of magic from either side that make the difference.
I agree. I think it's going to be like one of those ridiculously abrasive games of chess where they just take time to figure each other out, ultra pragmatic, kick ping pong, wait for a mistake and go. That being said, caginess, the fact that they're back in Dublin, they're going for their 13th straight home win, which surpassed the record from the Joe Schmidt era.
Yeah.
How big is it? They obviously lost this fixture 2 years ago, the Irish. There was nobody there. But now back at home, how big is home advantage with an Irish crowd, a full house in Dublin?
I think it's massive, and like Farrell came out today and talked it up as well about how important that Irish crowd is. But like there's a big connection. There's probably a bigger connection with the Irish rugby public now and this team than there was with Joe, and that's nothing against Joe, but basically, they love Farrell. They've grown to love Johnny Sexton, and that was, you would think, no, but that wasn't as straightforward as you would imagine a fellow with his success and caps and being captain of Ireland. They kind of they see the softer side to him now, but yet they admire that, I suppose, no nonsense attitude, the Roy Keane type figure who just wants to win at all costs, who's narky and gets upset with his players or whatever. But they understand him a little bit more now, and this team is very popular. They're very approachable. They're all playing here, etc., etc. And I think post COVID, like the atmosphere in November was phenomenal. Right, the atmosphere in November was phenomenal. But as you know, in November, it's 95%, maybe 98% Irish. You know what I mean? The Six Nations is completely different. Like there's a lot of French people coming over. They bring colour. They bring atmosphere. It'll be 80-20, and generally Irish fans, I think, will feed off that and know they have to really get behind their team and pressurize Wayne Barnes and try and get inside the French team's heads, and that's not a given because they're used to playing away from home and being better now. But and let's be honest, weekend one was brilliant. You know what I mean, of the Six Nations. So there's so much rugby on at the moment, and I thought we went into the Six Nations a little bit. It was a bit of a sleep, and there was also so much scandal in the game. Obviously Wales, big scandals, Scotland, England, the RFU, France with Laporte. So it was just great to be talking about rugby, and I think everyone who watched those three games enjoyed them immensely. And this is potentially a decider, 1 and 2 in the world, some incredible names. So yeah, there's a buzz around here. You can't get a ticket for love or money. Even all the corporates are sold out. So no, there's a big build up, and yeah, hopefully we get another cracker.
And in and amongst that buzz, you mentioned top 2 sides in the world. Ireland are number 1. How are they handling that? Are they taking it on the chin? Are they moving forward? Are they enjoying it? Like, what's the feeling in the Irish rugby public versus the playing staff and the group? How are they dealing with it generally?
You know what? Look, obviously there's going to be clowns out there who get carried away on social media and stuff as fans, right? But the team are very level-headed. I think Farrell, they brought in a brilliant guy, Farrell is very good at it himself, right? So he's been there, done that, played for Wigan when Wigan were the top dogs, and everyone wanted to beat them, and they managed to, I suppose, create success year on year and create a bit of a dynasty. So he's been there, and obviously that's great because the players, feel he knows what he's talking about, and he's lived that himself. Then he's got a lot of guys like O'Connell, who has done a brilliant job technically, but also is a talisman. And I think what they've done is they're sharing the pressure. So it became under Joe Schmidt, it became Joe's way, right, and everyone followed Joe. And he cranked up the pressure on everybody. And I was talking to Johnny Sexton at a I interviewed him at a corporate gig, and I asked him who's the best coach he ever had, and he said, by a mile, Joe Schmidt, right? By a mile, Joe Schmidt. But Andy Farrell is better for what Ireland need now, because the example he gave was Ireland used to train in this. Ireland stay in this hotel called Carton House, and if they're going into camp on a Sunday night at 8 o'clock, at 10 o'clock Sunday morning, Johnny would have his bag packed. And that afternoon, his wife would say to him, "Just go. You might as well not be here. You know what I mean? Your head is somewhere else." And he used to drive up the driveway, excited to get into camp, because in camp, Joe was going to tell him to the 9th degree what he needs to be better at, right? But he said his biggest learning as a leader was after the World Cup in 2019, when they reviewed the World Cup and the underperformance there. He found out there was 7 or 8 players getting to the gates of that hotel and not wanting to go in because it became so pressurized, so intense. And you know yourself, and you got to get a balance right between, the detail, but the relaxation, the camaraderie, the brotherhood, etc. And I think what he's done is he's put big pressure on the senior players, but across a multitude of players to lead this. And apparently that's what he's unbelievable at. So, we've all been involved in, leadership meetings on a Monday, and the coach says, "Look, what do you think of this, and what do you think of this defense strategy, blah blah," and you agree with everyone, agrees with it or don't agree with it, but once you agree with it, the coach leads it. But apparently Farrell says to them, like, yeah, okay, well, on Thursday, if it's not ready, what are you going to do about it? And because it's a shared process, and when it goes wrong, he doesn't throw anyone under the bus. There's that psychological safety or support there. I think they will deal with it better. I think they already are, and they're seeing it as about them just getting better. And even if we lose Saturday, I don't think it's going to blow up. I genuinely believe, I actually don't even think losing would be a terrible thing if an area of our game gets exposed that we think is perfect, if you know what I mean. And because for us, the World Cup has to be the be-all and end-all because of our lack of success there historically. So, but would we have a better chance of doing well in the World Cup if we could win the Six Nations? Yeah, absolutely.
One area of Ireland's game that a lot of people do think is perfect at the moment is the back row.
Yeah.
Getting a lot of plaudits in that area. France in the back row have got 3 quite similar types of players. They could all play 8, really, couldn't they? They could all play 6 probably, but they've not really got a 7 in there. Julian Marchand does a lot of work at the breakdown, work over the ball. Do you think Ireland could have an edge in that area?
Look, I love that French back row on paper. They obviously didn't perform at the weekend, and Aldridge, who's an amazing talent, just didn't fire to his normal level. I don't see that happening 2 weeks in a row. I think Ireland have a very good balance to their back row. I mean, Josh van der Fleer, obviously World Player of the Year. The only weakness his game is he's not a line-out option, but Ireland use him as a +1. They use his speed to break out and play a lot of plays into that seam of the line-out between the back and the 10 channel. So we manage that pretty well. He's got an unbelievable engine. He'll just keep going. He's added ball carrying, but yet he has an incredible ability to be effective and get to a lot of breakdowns, more so than the French three, I think. And then you have Doris, who's pretty good at everything. And then
you're not pretty good. How good is Caelan Doris?
Good. He's only 24. He's only 24. He's very
freak.
Good. He's a freak. He's very good. And then Peter Manny, I thought was done, to be honest. I mean, he'd lost his place. So the back row a year ago was Doris at 6, Jack Conan at 8, and Van der Fleer at 7. And Jack Conan was starting 8 for Gatland in South Africa on the Lions tour.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's on the bench because O'Mahony is just like statistically you wouldn't pick Peter Manny. And even I was talking to the Munster head analyst, and he was saying that he compares very poorly with a lot of the back rows in terms of just output. But if you can measure momentum swings, momentum changers, big moments, he has this ability to do that. So I think with Van der Fleer and Doris, you can you can play Peter O'Mahony, who will win you that big line-out steal, will get you that important jackal, is a leader, is a motivator, etc. And the balance looks pretty good, to be honest.
At the weekend, the French back row didn't even get involved in the game.
No.
I mean, there were no seen because the pressure Italy applied to the game, the ball they held, the way they shifted the point of contact, didn't allow them to settle. That's it. If Ireland do the same, it'll be difficult. If France are on the back foot, those boys are taken out of the game. That being said, when they're on form, when they get the ball, when they get a couple of big collisions and win some contact, we talked about the power game, and they're on the front foot, they're capable of generating that power themselves. They're a monstrous unit. Let's not kid ourselves. They're phenomenal. So it will be a huge challenge for both sides. I was going to ask you, like, based on the injuries we talked about and the key elements of the game, do you think, injuries aside, Ireland will make any tactical choices or changes in personnel for this weekend?
So Henshaw would always start for Ireland at 12 if he was fit. He's not back. So there's been a bit of debate around Bundy, Aki, or McCluskey. So McCluskey, I don't know if you know this, but Bundy's been out of favour in Connacht. There's rumours of disharmony and his form has been poor, but he came off the bench and was pretty good. Bundy's proven at international level, and Farrell likes him. But McCluskey's been incredible for Ulster, but just because of the Gordon Darcy, Ryan O'Driscoll, Gary Ringos, Robbie Henshaw, Bundy, he hasn't got a huge amount of starts, and I think Farrell was keen to start him against Wales because he'd started against South Africa, did well, and probably needs to get probably 8 or 9 starts into him, to know where he's at for the World Cup. But I think now, I don't know. I think Bundy may start this week, and that's nothing against McCluskey. It's just he may be a little bit more proven at that level, and I think he would make us better. To be honest, I think he would make us better, and he would thrive in that environment. So he's the only one.
And we've analysed all these different tactical elements. We've probably left out the biggest one. What's the Irish plan for Antoine Dupont?
Look, obviously everyone talks about him the week of the game. He's just so good, I think, at waiting for the right moment, to have a go himself. I don't think he can. Obviously, I don't think you can't man mark him. You can't get totally focused on him either. And the thing about him is that even like he has power, which is so like Duan van der Merwe is a massive man, right? So, and we know when he gets going in open country, he's incredibly hard to stop. But what I think is incredibly difficult to understand about Dupont is that there could be 2 forwards on him, and he manages to get through and uses his fend and uses his subtle footwork and power. So yeah, I think you just got to starve him a ball really. But there will be a moment when he has a chance, and we got to make sure that tackle is accurate, because he's just so hard to stop, and he's a former World Player of the Year. But Ireland have had a plan for him in the past and haven't managed to execute it.
So the big question: top 2 countries in the world, head to head this weekend. Whoever wins this weekend, is that going to be the winner of the Grand Slam? And if it is the case, how big a psychological edge is that going into a World Cup in September, October?
I think if France lose, I think they're still in a great place, and they go unbeaten for the rest of us, and then they have the home nature of the World Cup, which will give them a boost. If we win it, I think it would be. If we win this weekend, I think it's massive first, because it's that litmus test against a team who are bigger than us, and can bully us and have bullied us in the past. So, and it would also reassure everybody that we're this calendar year we're in good form. Which is like people are petrified. People are petrified that we're going to get caught again being at the top for a game a year out from a World Cup. So every single week we get closer to the World Cup, that we're not falling apart. We sleep a little bit easier. Look, you were telling me earlier on text that Scotland were going to win the Grand Slam. So you're putting me on the spot here. So look, no, I think on form in terms of over the last 2 years, and not seeing England bounce back immediately last week, and Wales look poor. And England coming to Dublin. I think if we could win this weekend, we're obviously in a very strong position. But that's there's been lots of shocks in this competition, and we have to win this weekend as well.
You'll probably change your mind numerous times back and forth during the course of the week. That's what normally happens. But sat here now, do you feel like Ireland are going to edge it?
Yeah, I think we will. Sexton didn't play last year. He's 7 or 8 points for us. I think makes us better. Gary Ringrose is just on a different level. Johnny mentioned Doris. We have the World Player of the Year. Our hooker, Dan Sheehan, is an unbelievable player as well. So we have a lot of guys kind of at the top of their game. And I didn't think I thought a lot of the Toulouse individuals have been a little bit off. And I felt they were tired, going into the Six Nations. And as I said, I understand why they maybe weren't at their best against Italy. But there's probably a doubt around the top form. Of some of Marchand's been good, but I thought Boy hasn't been himself. Willemse, he's a great player. I had him in Grenoble, but obviously he's not at the top of his game or hasn't been yet. They're missing Dante. A lot of pressure on Fiku. So maybe France are just aren't, maybe not at the very, very top of where they were and where they can be. And if they aren't, well, then you'd have to say, we'll hopefully exploit that.
Perfect. Thanks so much for coming on, Bernard. And
thanks,
we
guys.
can't wait.
Love the pod. Take it easy.
See you in Edinburgh in a few weeks for the real Grand Slam decider.
Take it easy.
Cheers.
The real Grand Slam decider, Johnny. Not that you're getting carried away or anything.
He's so good. I love having him on here. Such a good analyst, such a good coach. And you can't argue, like the two biggest teams in the world at the minute going head to head this weekend. It will be a huge game. So looking forward to it. Hope he's wrong a little bit. I'd love to see France winning away again, obviously. But yeah, massive improvement in performance needed if they're going to beat them with Johnny Sexton back with his face all healed. But yeah, looking forward to it. And also going to catch Bernie at Murrayfield in a few weekends' time.
And you're back in Scotland to beat them both anyway, so it doesn't matter.
I said Scotland are going to do a job over Wales this weekend. That's all I said. I said one game at a time if you're Scotland. It's a funny old comp. Like, do you know what I mean? Like France will be down on themselves, poor performance, but 5 points in the bag. Do you know, like it doesn't matter. You move on. It's block on block, week on week. You can't look too further ahead and get excited. So like for Scotland, massive game this weekend against Wales, who've been poor, but expecting them to be loads better this weekend. Like another week with Warren, probably a rocket on the Monday. They'll go back to ultra Warren ball, pragmatism. How do you squeeze Scotland? The same stuff we've seen from them for the past 15 years. So a big game at Murrayfield this weekend too.
And we obviously spoke about Italy and what they did to France. Do you see any chance that they could overturn England, beat them for the first time at Twickenham?
I mean, it would be marvellous. I'm not going to lie, Tim. Do I see it happening? Do you know what? I was a little bit surprised this morning with the way Borth, and he's not known for being a people person, but when you essentially come out and call your team shit, like what I've inherited is rubbish, doesn't really fill you with motivation as a player. It makes you think, oh, well, maybe we are shit, but they're not. They're a talented bunch of players. They just need to fix how they play and be a bit more ruthless. And if they do that, they should dispatch Italy without any problems. That being said, I'm looking forward to a closer game than has been in the past. I'm looking forward to Italy standing up at Twickenham and giving it a real go. It was amazing at the end of corporate at the weekend as well. Everyone was saying, is it too late to bring back Eddie? Can we bring back, we've made a mistake. Can we have him back? No, you can't. Like, this is it. You've made your bed. You've now got to stick to your guns, get through the next 4 weeks of rugby, build a team properly. That's their challenge against the resurgent Italy that's built really well over the past 24 months. So another big test match. And I'm looking forward to that one too. Should be great.
And back to the big one in Dublin, you mentioned French press, what they're reporting. Obviously, there could be speculation in terms of what France might do team-wise because their performance wasn't where they wanted it to be.
Yep.
What do you think Fabian's going to do? And if it was you, I mean, you mentioned last week you didn't necessarily think that Dumortier was going to be starting on the wing.
So Dumortier only started because Villiers broke his foot, or
Yeah.
he did his ankle in training. Otherwise, Villiers would have started. I don't think, like, I think they'll scratch it. Fabian said, like, this week in the prep, like, you can't be good all the time. It was our first game. We were dreadful. We can't be that bad again. I don't think they will, and I don't think strategically they'll change too much or do too much different. They'll have their set plays that they think from first phase will unlock an Irish defensive line. They'll look at the frailties and weaknesses they think they can expose, but there's not going to be any wholesale changes. Like, we talked about Jalibert there a little bit. Like, Jalibert can do what you want. I don't think he's going to start. Like, Roman Ntamak is the starter. He will be through to the World Cup. That's just the way it is. Again, it's about encouraging Fiku with Moefana, taking Moefana with him, doing more damage on the gain line, solidifying the middle of the field, and being solid as a pair. And then I just think you need to act more of that pack. They like we talked about the power game with Bernard, they have to go to Dublin, try and impose themselves physically and demolish a gain line. Take them on up front, whether it's maul, big ball carries, big defensive hits, double collisions, jackal properly and attack scrum. Like, that's going to be the simplicity of this game plan, is take it back to your bare basics of rugby and try and blitz Ireland. I don't think they'll look too much further than that. We talked about the kicking game. It will be ultra pragmatic. I don't think they'll go to the air and contest, because that's not really a big strength of this French side. I think they will kick long and on, keep the ball on the field and look for little errors where they can keep the ball and try and exploit them. So I don't think there's going to be personnel change. It's a side that's been settled. The 23, really, aside from the injuries, that have been settled for best part of 2 years now. I think they'll just give it another crack, wipe the slate clean, forget about it, and go again.
And you mentioned that Ireland are going for a record home run with Bernard.
Yeah.
France don't usually chase games. We know that I think they've only been behind twice at halftime in the Galtier era. They're obviously incredibly good front runners. And obviously that's even more key this weekend when you're going away from home to a side that is incredibly good at home. So for France, they will be pragmatic and they will look to just grind it out, won't they, I guess?
Well, look, a little bit like watching England-Scotland at the week. Like, all games now, the teams are super pragmatic. There's no rugby really played out of your third. Anytime you see somebody, anytime you see somebody try and run it back out, they get hit on the deck. The kick chase is so good, they get like everyone's on the back foot trying to scramble and regather their footing to come back and clear out. You get turned over. So again, Fabian talks so much about the start of the game. It will be, how do you silence a crowd? If you ship 15, 20, however many points to Ireland, like Wales did in Dublin, the game's gone. It's buried and it's gone, because once they get their tails up and the Dublin crowd is up, it's a horrible place to be. It's intimidating. Psychologically, it's not right. Whereas if France can go and impose themselves in the first 5-10 minutes, simple penalty, 3 points, big defensive play, keep the ball down in Ireland's half, force them to play out, then it becomes a different game. It becomes an arm wrestle. You quieten a crowd, and that'll be their aim for the first 10-15 minutes of this game, not to concede, start simply, and see where they find themselves. But a massive test match this weekend, one and two in the world. It'll be absolutely incredible to watch.
And Bernard's back in Ireland. Are you back in France or what?
Yeah, I think similar to the games that we saw, the tight games the first weekend, the difference of one score. But I think they've got enough in that. I think they've had an absolute rocket as well. Like, especially when you go into the mentality of Frenchies, like, there's a lot of up and down and reaction. So I think if you get a big reaction and a big start from the squad, they can go and do a job. And it has to be that they boss it physically. If they're going to win this game, they have to impose themselves and dominate, which I think they're capable of doing. They've got the players there. They've got the pool. We've seen Toulouse, La Rochelle do it away from home. That's where the mainstay of the side comes from. Like Bernard said, he said tight. I think it's going to be tight, but just the other way. France to nick it by a score, not by any more.
And we said we'd touch just very briefly on the top 14, so we will. You've just got back, haven't you, from doing a game? Absolute cracker Sunday night?
It was the worst game of rugby I think I've ever worked on. I did Stade Francais Bordeaux last night. It barely got beyond 4 phases. Bordeaux, I think they lost about 27 lineouts. That's how bad they were. But bizarrely, Stade Francais, another 4 points. They consolidate their place in second behind Toulouse and they march on. But mate, it was desperate. It really was desperate. It was like they'd never seen each other before, hadn't trained together. It was abysmal. But there you go. That's what I was doing last night. But yeah, I think, again, they'll be like, scratch that game, all of them, forget about it, let's move on.
And we had 3 away wins in the first round of the Six Nations, away wins in the top 14 as well. La Rochelle losing at home. That never happens.
Incredibly. And again, we didn't talk about this last week, but Roger's been pinged again on a disciplinary commission. So he's just back from a 10-game ban, and he's been cited again. So that doesn't look good for him. But La Rochelle, incredibly, it was Leon as well. I didn't see that coming at all. Teddy Thomas getting one kick chase really wrong, not looking interested, tackling big Josh Tuisova. And that was the ball game. Not much difference at all, but a disappointing home loss for La Rochelle, who normally are so solid at home. And a big win away from home from Lyon.
Montpellier lost at home as well, but the other big away win was Perpignan at Brive, and they're now
absolutely
level on
massive
points, aren't they, at the bottom?
Absolutely massive, especially at this stage of the season. Psychologically, we'll look ahead at the calendar and how the fixtures evolve. But for Perpignan, who kind of been dead and buried and been so much made about their staff and their manager, and I think a lot of the business end of the club was wanting to sack the management and get rid of them, and the players said, look, absolutely not. If you do it, we're going to go on strike. We're not going to train. We want them here. They're good people. They stuck to their guns, and winning away to Brive, who also had a little bit of resurgence after Patrice Calazo came in after that change of leadership. That's a massive away win for Perpignan. The fact they've won, they're tied, as you mentioned, on points, and now a 2-way shootout to avoid that bottom spot and automatic relegation.
And one line of transfer news in the top 14, because we've spoken in recent weeks about Semi Randrandra replacing Tuisova in Lyon, but there are rumours as well that Josh Adams could be going to Lyon. Do you think that could happen?
Purely because the Welsh Union isn't in a good shape financially. He's got 2 years left on his contract, but they've sounded them out about the possibility of buying him out of his contract with 2 years left, which would be a massive call for the Welsh Union to let him go. Also, that would mean if he leaves, he can't play for Wales. So it's a big decision for Josh, to be made in the next 3, 4, 5 weeks. A big signing for Lyon if he does make the move, but a big loss for Welsh rugby.
Any other transfer news, gossip, scandal?
Gossip, scandal? No, there's some transfer news.
Okay.
There's no sex tapes this week.
Never mind.
The Martin Pagerello, the scrum half from Toulouse, has been announced at Lyon as a replacement for Jonathan Pelissier. Louis Dupichot from Racing looks like he might be moving down to Toulon. Harry Williams, we mentioned last week, has been confirmed as moving to Montpellier, along with Luke Cowan-Sickie and San Simmons. So look, things are starting to move already, especially I didn't expect the number of non-Gif players. I thought it was going to slow down, but there's quite a few, especially from the Premiership, making their way over. The other one I think will be really interesting when he makes his decision, Tom Willis, who was excellent for Bordeaux last night, one of the few that actually was good to watch on his way back to Saracens. Jack Willis, still being courted by Bordeaux, performing really well for Toulouse. So it'll be interesting to see where he ends up in the next few weeks.
Thanks, Johnny. A big thanks to Bernard Jackman for joining us and giving us his analysis on this weekend's game. And massive thanks to all you guys for listening. Make sure you hit subscribe. Leave us a nice review if you can. Check us out on Rugby Pass and on YouTube. And we will be back with another episode next week. Au revoir, Johnny.
Ciao, Tim.